Since March of this year, Bitcoin has experienced 2 consecutive 20% corrections. It's a big shift in behavior compared to what we saw throughout 2023 and the beginning of 2024. When Bitcoin begins to lose momentum, things can take a turn for the worse. So is the price action that we're seeing on Bitcoin today signaling that this has just been a huge topping pattern with Bitcoin ready to move lower? If you watched our last video on Bitcoin, you'll know that we were looking at this price channel. Following its peak in March, our expectation was that Bitcoin was going to make its way back to the channel and then possibly resume its bull market. There was definitely a great setup in May of this year to buy Bitcoin. All of the key moving averages on Bitcoin were pointing upwards, suggesting the trend was very strong and price was right above a very key level of support. You also had the S&P 500 that was surging to new all-time highs in May, and the possibility for Bitcoin to actually catch up to the rest of the market. Now, with this setup back in May, we initiated a trade on Bitcoin on our website. Initially, it did play out for a nice move, but Bitcoin failed to break above resistance and started to turn around, completely diverging from what the S&P 500 has been doing. Now, we closed half of our position on Bitcoin when it broke below this trend line that you see right here for around a 10% profit. Then you can see Bitcoin continued to move lower, hitting our stop loss, which was this price channel right here, and even closing below it. So unfortunately, we had to close the rest of our position on Bitcoin. We closed this trade right at the same level where we actually initiated it in May. Today, with this breakdown on Bitcoin, the technical posture is broken, which concerns us, which brings in the possibility of additional downside on Bitcoin in the short term, which of course we want to make sure we're avoiding risking that to our clients. Now, could this be a whipsaw or what's called a false breakdown or a bear trap? Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, the S&P 500 is at all-time highs, and typically Bitcoin and the S&P 500 have been incredibly closely correlated. The last 2 times that we had such a strong divergence between Bitcoin and the stock market was actually in January of 2024. Bitcoin eventually caught back up to the S&P 500, and in January of 2023, where the S&P 500 was moving higher, but Bitcoin was still making new lows at $16,000. Eventually, Bitcoin caught back up to the S&P 500. It could be that we're in exactly the same situation, but if we zoom out a little bit further and we look at what was happening in November of 2021, you can see Bitcoin was moving lower while the S&P 500 was moving higher, and this time it wasn't Bitcoin that caught up to the S&P 500, but just the opposite. The S&P 500 caught down to Bitcoin. We also have evidence that large Bitcoin holders have actually been selling over the last few months, which is the very opposite to what they were doing towards the end of 2022. If you want to have more information on what large Bitcoin holders are doing, you can check this video out from Capital.com. They did a great dive into that dynamic. So there's always 2 ways to look at any asset. There's a bullish case and there's a bearish case to be made. Ultimately, what really determines whether you're going to be able to make money is how good your risk management is. Only initiate trades that have a great risk reward. Always book profits when things are going well. Don't close winning positions too early, and don't let your winners turn into losers. Those are just 4 of the many principles that we teach to our clients. We applied to our Bitcoin trade. We initiated the trade when the risk was much smaller than the potential reward. We booked profits quite early when things were going well, and we completely cut our exposure to the position before it could turn into a more heavy loss. Today, Bitcoin is clearly in a sideways trading range with no clear direction. One possible scenario is for Bitcoin to test the bottom of this price channel before potentially catching up to the S&P 500. This would be a classic bear trap type of move. So we'll be closely watching Bitcoin for other trading opportunities. We do still have an active trade on crypto right now, and that's with Solana. We initiated the trade right as Solana was testing this key trend line that was defined by these 2 lows in 2023. Now, I know some people are going to argue that this is not enough to define a trend line and that I know nothing about technical analysis, but the reality is that we've had many successful trades on these types of setups, and Solana is already up 10% since it tested this key trendline support. This is one of the cryptocurrencies with the strongest looking charts, with a technical setup that looks very similar to July of 2021, where Solana experienced a huge run up followed by a multi-month consolidation, successfully tested its 200-day moving average, and then resumed its run higher. Today, we've seen a huge run up on Solana, multi-month consolidation, and so far, what looks like a successful test of the 200-day moving average. In fact, if we copy the price action that Solana saw in 2021 and paste it to what we've seen in 2023 and 2024, it seems Solana is following the same path, but a little bit more stretched out. If it continues to follow the same path, Solana could get as high as $560. Again, just because we think the reward could be great doesn't mean that we won't be applying the same strict risk management strategy in the event that Solana begins to break down below this bullish structure. Being very picky and strict with our trades on crypto has brought a lot of success to our clients participating in these this year. These are all of the trades that we've closed on crypto since the start of 2024. You can see all of the losses that we've endured on crypto are very small despite the high volatility in the space, while some of the winners are indeed very large. Now, there's no guarantee we'll be able to keep this up, but we are working day in, day out to make sure that's going to be the case.